Stop right there. The words shot out of Arthur's mouth with more force than he intended. Heads turned in the polished marble foyer of the bank, but Arthur's world had already shrunk to a single focal point, the golden pendant hanging from the neck of the young teller behind the counter. Clara, her name badge read, paused mid-sentence, her eyes widening slightly. Sir, she asked, startled but maintaining her professional demeanor. Arthur stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. That pendant, he said, his voice taut with urgency. Where did you get it? She instinctively touched the delicate charm resting against her skin, her fingers brushing its surface. It was a gift from my grandmother, she said slowly, her brow furrowing. Why? Arthur didn't answer right away. He couldn't. His mind was racing, his thoughts fragmented and wild. That pendant, it wasn't just familiar, it was exact. The last time he seen it, it had been around the neck of his daughter Emma, the day she vanished without a trace. 20 years of searching, of dead ends and shattered hopes, came crashing into this one surreal moment. Are you all right, sir? Clara asked, her voice laced with genuine concern. Arthur forced a strange smile and stepped back, waving his hand dismissively. I'm fine, just memories. But inside he was anything but fine. His pulse roared in his ears as he turned and walked briskly toward the exit, leaving the faint scent of sterilized bank air behind. That evening Arthur sat in his dimly lit study, staring at the fire crackling in the hearth. In his hand was a photograph, the last one ever taken of Emma. Her eyes sparkled with laughter as she grinned at the camera, her tiny hands clutching the same golden pendant now worn by a stranger. He had spent 2 decades chasing shadows, following every rumor, every whisper that might lead him back to her, each dead, and had chipped away at his resolve until hope itself became a burden. But now, for the first time in years, that burden felt lighter. The pin, it wasn't just a coincidence, it couldn't be. He felt it in his bones, in the same way he had always felt that Emma was still out there waiting for him to find her. Arthur picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. Jacob Harper, the gruff voice said on the other end. Jacob, it's Arthur, he said, his voice steady but heavy with unspoken emotions. I think I found something. I need your help. By the next morning, Jacob had already begun his investigation. A retired private investigator, Jacob had worked with Arthur in the early years of Emma's disappearance. He had been relentless back then, chasing down every lead, but time had dulled their pursuit. Now the fire was rekindled. Her name's Clara Dawson, Jacob told Arthur during their first update call. 25 years old, works at the bank, raised by her grandmother after her parents supposedly died in a car accident. But here's the catch, there's barely any record of her before she turned 18. Arthur's hand tightened around the phone. What do you mean, barely any record? I mean, it's like someone wiped her early history clean, Jacob said. No school records, no medical files, nothing substantial. And her grandmother, Margaret Dawson, wasn't exactly forthcoming. When I spoke to her, she claimed the pendant belonged to Clara's mother, but I don't buy it. Arthur's mind raced. The pieces didn't fit unless someone had gone to great lengths to ensure they wouldn't. Arthur couldn't stay away. The sight of Clara's pendant haunted him, and he needed to know more. 2 days later he walked back into the bank. Clara greeted him with the same polite smile, but when he asked to speak to her in private, her brows knit with concern. In the privacy of a small conference room, Arthur laid his cards on the table. Clara, I need to ask you something deeply personal. Her unease was palpable, but she nodded. All right. Arthur gestured toward her necklace that pinned it. Do you know where your grandmother got it? Clara frowned, her hand instinctively touching the charm. She always said it belonged to my mother, that it was a family heirloom. Why? Arthur swallowed hard. Because that exact pendant belonged to my daughter Emma. She disappeared 20 years ago. I've been looking for her ever since. Clara's face drained of color. You think I don't know, Arthur admitted, his voice thick with emotion. But the resemblance, the timing, the pendant, it's too much to ignore. I need to know the truth. Clara agreed to a DNA test, though she was visibly shaken by the implications. Arthur's hope surged, tempered only by the fear of yet another disappointment. He barely slept in the days that followed, pacing his study and staring at Emma's photograph as if willing the results to come sooner. When the envelope finally arrived, Arthur's hands trembled as he tore it open. His eyes scanned the document and his breath hitched. It was true. Clara Dawson was in fact Emma Clark. The joy of reunion was short-lived. Jacob's investigation uncovered a sinister truth. Emma's abduction had been orchestrated by Jonathan Wells, a former business associate of Arthur. The reason? Revenge. Wells blamed you for the collapse of his company. Jacob explained he lost everything and decided to take it out on you by taking Emma. Arthur's blood boiled. The thought of a petty vendetta stealing 2 decades of his daughter's life made his skin crawl. Arthur confronted Wells at his sprawling estate. You took her, he roared, his voice echoing through the marble halls. Wells, cal and unrepentant, leaned back in his chair. You ruined me, Arthur. I wanted you to feel the same emptiness. You're a monster. Arthur spat. And you'll pay for what you've done with Wells behind bars. Arthur and Emma began the long painful process of rebuilding their relationship. There were moments of joy and moments of heartbreak as they grappled with the years stolen from them, but slowly they found their way back to each other. For Emma, formerly Clara, life had become an overwhelming whirlpool of revelations. She stood in the grand hallway of her newfound father's estate, staring at the family photos lining the walls. A young Arthur with a beaming Emma stared back at her in countless frames. She felt a pang of guilt and sadness. She didn't recognize the man or the memories he so clearly cherished. Do you remember this one? Arthur asked gently, holding up a frame where a toddler Emma sat on his shoulders, her tiny hands gripping his hair with glee. Emma shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. I don't. I'm sorry. Arthur's face faltered for a moment, but he quickly masked his disappointment. That's okay, he said, placing the photo back on the shelf. We'll make new ones. Despite his optimism, the void of 2 decades loomed heavily between them. Emma struggled to reconcile the identity she built as Clara with the person she was meant to be. Emma Clark, a daughter stolen from her rightful life. The transition wasn't just difficult for Emma. Arthur wrestled with anger, guilt, and determination. He wanted to help Emma heal, but the betrayal of those who had taken her demanded his attention. As Jacob delved deeper into the Dawson family's past, another layer of deceit unraveled. I've got something, Jacob said during one of their late-night calls. Margaret Dawson wasn't just complicit in raising Emma, she knew exactly who she was. Arthur's grip tightened on the phone. What do you mean? Margaret wasn't paid just to take Emma in. She was part of Wells' inner circle. She owed him favors, serious ones, and this was how she paid him back. Arthur's heart sank. Margaret had seemed like a frail, unassuming woman during Jacob's interviews. Now she was the final piece in a decades-old conspiracy. If she had willingly hidden Emma, then she had answers to questions that had tormented Arthur for years. Arthur drove to Margaret's small aging home on the edge of the city. The woman greeted him with a weary look when she opened the door, her hand trembling as she clutched her cardigan. I know who you are, Margaret said before Arthur could speak, and I know why you're here. Then you know I won't leave without the truth, Arthur replied, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Margaret shuffled to the living room, lowering herself into an armchair. I never wanted to hurt her, she began, her voice quivering. Emma was a sweet girl, but I had no choice. Arthur leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. You always had a choice. Why did you take her? Margaret wrung her hands, staring at the floor. Wells came to me when Clara Emma was just a baby. I owed him money, more than I could ever repay. He told me about you, about what you did to him. He said taking your daughter would balance the scales. Arthur clenched his fists, his anger threatening to boil over. So you just went along with it? You stole my child and pretended she was your granddaughter? Margaret flinched. He said he'd ruin me if I didn't. I thought I could keep her safe, give her a good life, and I did. I loved her as my own. Loved her. Arthur's voice cracked. You didn't love her. You imprisoned her. You robbed her of her family, her identity, and 20 years of her life. Margaret's head hung low, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I am. Arthur stood abruptly, his jaw set. You'll answer for this. Every person who kept us apart will. While Arthur sought justice, Emma was left to confront her fractured sense of self. She returned to Margaret's home one evening, not to seek answers but to demand closure. Why didn't you tell me? Emma asked, her voice trembling as she stood in the doorway. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I thought I was protecting you. Emma let out a bitter laugh. Protecting me by lying to me, by letting me believe I was Clara Dawson when I was Emma Clark all along. Margaret reached out, but Emma stepped back. I loved you, Margaret said softly. That part wasn't a lie. Emma's voice acted as she replied, if you loved me you wouldn't have let me live a life built on lies. With Margaret's confession and Jacob's evidence, Arthur's legal team pursued both her and Wells. The case became a media sensation, with headlines painting Wells as a cruel mastermind and Margaret as a complicit accomplice. The court's decision was swift. Wells received a lengthy prison sentence while Margaret faced charges for her role in concealing Emma's identity. Though justice was served, the emotional toll on Emma and Arthur was profound. Emma grappled with guilt over her attachment to Margaret while Arthur struggled to rebuild his daughter's trust. Months passed and the pain of the past slowly began to fade. Arthur and Emma took small steps toward healing, learning to laugh together and share moments of quiet joy. They revisited places Arthur had once frequented with Emma as a child, from sunny parks to ice cream parlors. One afternoon as they walked through a blooming garden, Emma spoke, do you think you'll ever feel like me again, like I know who I am? Arthur placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You're Emma Clark, he said gently, but you're also the person you've been all these years. Both are real and both are you. Emma smiled faintly, the words bringing a small measure of peace. The day Emma officially reclaimed her identity was one of quiet celebration. She legally changed her name back to Emma Clark, a symbolic step toward reclaiming the life stolen from her. Arthur watched proudly as she signed the papers, tears welling in his eyes. I never thought I'd see this day, he admitted, but here Emma squeezed his hand. Thank you for never giving up. Father and daughter continued to rebuild their bond, growing stronger with time. On the anniversary of her disappearance, they visited the site of her abduction, a small garden now overgrown with wild flowers. This is where it all changed, Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. Emma knelt, touching the soft petals of a flower. And this is where we start again.